Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and welcome to my channel, Black Brazil Today, where I discuss Brazil from the perspective of race. Today, I wanted to talk about an incident, a shocking incident that happened. I guess it's been about 3 weeks ago now. I'm surprised it didn't really get a lot of attention. I thought this would probably, it would cause more commotion in the media. It almost seems like, I mean, I know it was reported, but it just didn't. It's as shocking as it was. I was just surprised that there were not more people who were discussing this particular incident. Again, this is something that happens in a country that you would believe, or you're told to believe, that we don't have these type of racial problems in Brazil, right? Because of the infamous racial democracy myth, which I discussed in my previous video. But this is from June 14th, just like I said, about 3 weeks ago. And this article is again taken from my source blog called Black Women of Brazil at .co, blackwomenofbrazil.co. An article is called Brutal Racially Motivated Murder. 66-year-old chases down a 62-year-old black man, chases him down the street, stabs him 20 times. And also we find out that this aggressor didn't accept having a black grandchild, black grandson. So this is the victim, 62-year-old. I see that the security camera is from May 31st of this year. And it just shows the man, walking away from the incident. Let me just get into the story, because again, it was just horrific. Shocking, brutal, barbaric. There are so many thoughts that come to mind after reading the details involving such a brutal act of hatred. As my regular readers know, this blog has sought to analyze Brazil from the perspective of race since its debut back in November of 2011. After having already written about race in Brazil since 2001, I have always wondered how it is that Brazil managed to convince its citizens and the rest of the world that it was somehow a racial democracy. Since the 1950s, numerous books and reports have exposed the racial problem in the country. But even so, the Latin American giant's image remains relatively clean. Later, even when the myth of racial democracy idea was completely debunked, the new thesis was that racism in Brazil was subtle and that the problem wasn't as serious as that in the United States or South Africa. But after looking into this thoroughly, I wondered, how could this be? Now, this is if you scroll down in this article, you see other articles that I've referred to, whether it's talking about just racism towards just Black Brazilians, or it's how Haitian and African immigrants are treated in this country. It talks a little bit about how you have numerous neo-Nazi groups in Brazil. It's a little known fact, but Brazil had, if not the largest, had one of the largest communities of, or followers of, the Nazi Party. Sometime, it was probably before World War II, sometime right around, maybe before World War II and a little bit after World War II. It was an enormous population of, particularly in the southern portion of the country, where, Brazil is divided into 5 different regions. And generally the Northeast is considered to be more Black and brown people, whereas the 3 most southern states are where you have an overwhelming majority of people who consider themselves white, people who came to Brazil, like 4 to 5 million immigrants who came to Brazil between the end of the 19th century and like halfway through the 20th century. So this is some of the background, how some of these incidents can come about. And it's just evidence that shows you, like, what is a racial democracy about this country. So I always, post the material that I use. They always be in the description box. You can go by and read the whole article, because I go a little bit more in depth as to how ridiculous it is to believe that this country doesn't have any race problems. Let's look at this incident that just happened. This is about maybe 3 weeks ago that I reported on it. 62-year-old man is killed by his neighbor who didn't accept Blacks. The civil police concluded that the stabbing death of a 62-year-old man in the neighborhood of Tirol in the Bahia region of Belo Horizonte, which is the capital city of Minas Gerais, was motivated by racism. The inquiry was presented on Wednesday, I guess that's June 10th. Yeah, I guess that's about June 10th. The suspect in the crime is another elderly man who is 66, who was constantly at odds with the victim because of racial intolerance. Antonio Alves de Freitas, 62 years old, was chased and killed after being stabbed 20 times by a neighbor, Joel G. Souza Lima, 66, in an attack motivated by racism. According to the police chief responsible for the investigations, Domenico Rocha, the two had an extensive history of fights due to the suspect's racism. 10 witnesses were heard and all confirmed that the perpetrator of the crime is racist and offends all Black people. Okay, so these are the heads of the police here during a civil police interview in Belo Horizonte. As soon as the investigations began and the witnesses began to be heard, it became clear to the civil police that the motivation of the author's intolerance towards Black-skinned people was, or what the motivation was. Witnesses claimed that the perpetrator, was openly racist and openly assumed this despicable and inferior sentiment towards Black people. Due to this anger and hatred that he spread against Blacks, he fell out with the victim once again, and unfortunately, the facts evolved to the victim's death, said the police chief. Again, this is an image from the security camera in that neighborhood. It shows the victim leaving the bar to avoid, any problems, but he was actually chased down the street. You'll see that in the other picture. On the day of the crime, the perpetrator was at a bar drinking when the victim arrived, and according to the witnesses, Antonio heard the offenses against him and out of fear decided to leave. The owner of the bar, already aware of the problems between the two, had asked the victim to leave. He left, but sometime later, the suspect went to his house and continued the offenses, said Rocha. Not satisfied with the verbal assaults, the man armed himself with a club and a knife, confronted Antonio in the front of their homes and beat the 62-year-old, even stabbed him 20 times. The victim tried to flee the perpetrator, but was chased down the street until he was killed. Again, this is an image from the actual security camera. You see the guy, he's got a knife in one hand and a club in the other hand, and he actually went after the guy. Again, you look at the previous picture, the guy's trying to get away from the scene. Like, I don't want, he's already had run-ins with this guy. He's trying to escape the scene so that no confusion gets started. He's already had a history of coming head to head with this guy. And in the next picture, you see the guy actually chasing him down the street with a club in one hand and a knife in the other hand. Let's see what else we have here. One of the witnesses said in a statement that she witnessed the day before, the author showed the knife used in the murder, saying he had acquired this knife to kill a person. He killed the victim with 20 blows, including in his face, which characterizes that the author sought to hit not only the person, but the identity of the victim because of this hatred that he had against Black people. The killer claimed that the motive was actually a disagreement between the neighbors. But according to the deputy, that version was deconstructed during the investigation. 10 people were heard in the investigation, and the civil police understood that the cause of the murder was indeed what they call racial injury. Now, I have to get into racial injury and actual racism at another time. It's just when something is defined as a racial injury or a racial slur, the punishment to the crime is a lot less severe. Oftentimes, a person would just pay a fine and walk out scot-free. Whereas if it's considered a racial injury against just that particular person. Whereas racism has a much stronger penalty, more time in jail, a higher fine, and it's generally this is associated with a crime against all Black people, right? Whatever that person might have did, it's not. He didn't do to commit this crime just against this one person, but his racist ideology was like a crime against all Black people. That's the difference between racial injury or slur versus racism, and how these types of crimes are how they're deemed, how they're judged. Continuing on, for the police chief, the manner of the attack shows a way of attacking the dignity as well as the identity of a person, which reinforces the thesis of racism. The head of the Specialized Division for the Investigation of Crimes Against Life, Chief Emerson Moraes, cited recent racism crimes around the world. Now, this is this is shortly after the whole George Floyd incident had went down. And it was just a thing of Brazilians, like, we get people George Floyd incidents like this happen every day in Brazil, basically what they're saying. Like, the United States always gets the focus around the world why these types of incidents happen, and it gets blown up in the worldwide media, whereas Black people in Brazil are constantly murdered in brutal manners, whether it's everyday violence in the streets or why it's police brutality. This happens in Brazil almost every day, and the worldwide media doesn't really always pick up on it. Crime of racism. According to the chief or the delegate, the content of the testimonies brings words such as barbaric, vulgar, and unpronounceable, used by Joel to divulge his hatred daily against Black people. Because of this, he will be indicted for racism, not racial insult. And there's the difference that you have there. This is Moraes. He's speaking on the racism against Black color and origin. And he says it's rooted in Brazil's DNA. That's something that I've said for years. Quote, it's never too much to say that we're living in a unique moment with a movement that started in the United States due to the death of George Floyd, and that motivated a wave of protests against racism around the world. We can easily draw a parallel with the situation experienced in Brazil, which has racism rooted in its culture. It is also rooted in the DNA, the color Black, our Black origins, concludes Moraes. Racism is a crime against society, against collectivity in general, not a specific person. He verbally assaulted not only relatives of the victim, but people who resided nearby. And he spoke of racist improprieties, not directed at a specific person, but at the society as a whole. Joel is in jail and will answer for double murder, racism, and racial insults. If convicted of all the crimes, the added sentences could be up to 36 years in prison. The accused, according to Moraes, was racist even with his own family. During the investigations, it was discovered that his son had married a Black woman, which was disapproved by the father. Even when the grandson was born, he refused to recognize the child because of the color of his skin. Again, this goes into something that I discussed in a previous video, the idea that we have mixed marriages here, so how can we be racist? Well, simply because you have a mixed marriage does not mean that your entire family accepts it. I've seen numerous scenarios where, okay, just the couple exists on paper, true. They may be or they may not be happily married, but it doesn't mean that the entire society accepts it. You still get a lot of people. It's funny how you look at interracial marriages. It's almost like you get people who will think like, well, Black people want to improve their race. That's why they marry white. You get other people who say, well, look at how many prominent Black people don't marry Black people. You know, if they had so much pride in their own race, how come they always marry white partners? And, you know, I've seen numerous white people ask that same question. But, you know, I don't want to, I'll get into this whole thing of the interracial thing again, because there's plenty of material where I've discussed this in previous posts. But just the idea that brutal attacks, you know, humiliating interactions between Black people and white people, the idea that this doesn't exist, because this is something that you see all the time here. And this is not even including the fact that all of these incidents are not going to make the news. As many things that happen here in Brazil on a daily basis, just with one blog, I can't even cover all of it, but I just want to give you a couple of examples to give you an idea, like, no, this is not an isolated incident. This particular case ended with somebody's death, which is also not something that is rare. You have other incidents where it's just, you know, verbal assaults, you know, a racist gesture, somebody saying something verbally as a joke or an insult of some sort. You have people getting attacked physically that doesn't necessarily end up with death. You've seen lynchings here. And I have to get into that another time. You know, when I say lynchings, I don't necessarily mean in the American sense of being lynched with a rope as what we most associate it with in the United States. I just mean one person being brutally murdered by a group of people at the same time. So just to give you an example of what I'm saying, this is not something that really happens in Brazil. You see these incidents of, you know, racial attacks, you know, racial assaults. And it's just clear that there's this racial hierarchy here that says, I'm above you because you're Black. Or even if sometimes people experience racism and they don't even consider themselves to be Black because they've been taught to distance themselves from having a Black identity. Thus, when they experience this discrimination, they're often caught off guard because they never saw themselves as Black. Let me take a look at another article just to give you an idea. Like I said, this is not something that's new here. This is an article from 2017, which I called Go back to the slave quarters, you monkey, and straighten that hair. A black woman was punched and dragged by her hair in a pub. The aggressor pays a fine and walks away. So let's get into this article here. Again, from 2017, and this happened, I believe, in the state of Mato Grosso. Businessman and doctor are accused of racism and aggression in a pub. A case of racism and physical aggression against a tourist who spent the long holiday in Cuiabá. Again, this is a city in the state of Mato Grosso, has been shared through a Facebook posting by dozens of internet users. According to the publication, the woman identified as Juliana Souza was called a monkey, or macaca in Portuguese, by a couple sitting next to her and her cousins in a pub of the city. When she left the bathroom, she was punched by the man and her hair was pulled by his companion. Falling on the floor, she heard from the suspect, supposedly a doctor, that she should not be there, being called macaca once again and a slave. Do you think it's bad to be called negra? Is what you are, and you have to passa chapinha no cabelo. He's telling her to go straighten his hair. Chapinha is a type of flattening iron that they use to straighten their hair. The situation was broken up by security guards who were also called macacos and beaten by the businessman who accompanied her. Let's keep going here. Let me see. I think I want to scroll down. This just goes into more of the details of what happened here. He said to her, you do not have to be here, you monkey, you slave. Go back to the senzala. The senzala in Portuguese, in English, it means go back to the slave quarters. Again, you think it's bad to be called black, it's what you are. You have to straighten that hair. It's often said that here in Brazil, cabelo crespo, meaning kinky or curly hair, is actually more offensive to society than actual dark skin. I remember reading some years ago in another study on racism in Brazil, it was almost a thing of a common saying would be like, well, he's a little dark, but at least he has good hair. So it's just like, we can quote unquote forgive the dark skin as long as the hair is quote unquote good. And numerous articles in this blog, you'll take a look, you'll see all of these discussions of what's good hair and bad hair in Brazil. Not going to get into that today, but one of these days I'll have to go down that road so you can understand it's like the same things that African Americans experience, or African descendants anywhere in the world that live in multiracial societies. We have the same issues. Anyway, I wanted to get into just some things that popped out in this particular article. Let's see here. Number one, once again, we have an issue of a black person being told they're outside of their place. The mere presence of the victim was enough to warrant not only insults, but also a violent aggression. You're black. What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be in a place, a nice, ritzy or sophisticated, environment, or an upper crust environment. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in a favela. That's the idea that people have about black people here. Again, I'm not saying everybody, but I'm just saying this has been documented for years that the middle classes here in general don't see black people as being members of the middle class. Like if you're in a middle class neighborhood, you must be working here. Number two, again, the popular usage of the term macaca, meaning monkey, is a favorite term in Brazil to dehumanize a black woman, and also the rejection of Brazilian society of natural black hair. Three, the victim from Uberlândia, which is in the state of Minas Gerais, again, it says she was a tourist in this city in Mato Grosso. She traveled from one Brazilian state to another. She possesses post-grad degrees in her profession. This debunks the myth that as black people would earn a college degree and secure gainful employment, that racism that they already say doesn't exist won't affect them. So here it's like a catch-22 situation. It's like, on the one hand, you say racism does exist. Okay, but if it does exist and we're denying that it exists, if you have a college degree and a good job, then this won't happen to you. And this clearly proves that that's not the case. The person who attacked her saw a black woman, like she doesn't belong here, and I'm going to show her that she doesn't belong here. And he assaulted her. 4, one of the aggressors is a rich businessman and the other a PhD level college professor. In other words, they are the cream of the crop of the society, and this is their behavior. It speaks to the fact that many white Brazilians don't and never will accept Afro-Brazilians as equal human beings to be respected. It also makes one understand that what type of people, it also makes one understand what type of people are employed in Brazilian universities. I wonder how this professor feels about affirmative action policies. Another issue I have to get into another time. 5, again, we see an elite Brazilian having no fear of any consequences for his racism or for his action. We've seen in past posts where someone attacks a Black Brazilian and faced with possible punishment, they say they'll just pay a fine and walk away free, which I've seen happen too many times that I can count. In this case, the guy said he would simply pay a bribe, he said, and walk away free. In the end, he paid a fine and he walked. If the man is indeed rich, how would an 8,000 real, at the time it was worth $2,400, how would an 8,000 real fine stop him from doing this again? As I've written before, racism in Brazil is a perfect crime. And speaking of this, let me get to number 6. I've often read Brazilians say we can't be racist because there are laws against it. Really? There's been a law against racism for decades, but for some reason it doesn't seem to impede racists from doing what they do best. Let me get on to another article. Just again, like I'm saying, I just want you to get the idea, like these are not isolated incidents. This is not, we're all mixed. So what racial problems do we have? Like I said, in the racial hierarchy here, the closer you are to whiteness, the more you are accepted, right? This is an article from 2016, and this made front page news. This made, TV news journals. And it was just, again, where's the racial democracy here? So many people believe in. I called this article, this is based on what this woman said at a beach. Next time, be born white. You have a complex because of being born mulata with hard hair. A Black woman, or you could call her mulata if you want. Some people would say she's Black because more and more people are accepting a Black identity as opposed to being a mulato or morena. More on that in one of my first videos. You check that out. A woman is verbally assaulted on a Rio beach by a middle-aged white woman who defines herself as a supporter of Hitler. So just imagine you're on the beach, enjoying yourself, and all of a sudden you get this woman that just starts coming at you and, hurling just insults at you, right? It's funny because, and this is something else that I can discuss in another video, but some of the beautiful beaches in Rio are often some of the times where Brazilian racism shows itself the most, because it's like these beaches are supposed to be visited by, middle class, mostly white people. And so when they see brown and dark skinned people coming to the beach, it's automatically like, what are they doing here? We have incidents where just riots break out on the beach. Sometimes it'll be, a kid, a petty thief, or, stole something from somebody, and then the whole melee starts from there. But my question is, we know that crime happens in society, right? But my question is, just being Black, does that mean that if I go to a beach, because I'm Black, that means I shouldn't be there because you believe that I'm gonna commit a crime? When vast majority of people don't commit crimes. I mean, and then you're going to always see crime in societies that have such a huge difference between the rich and the poor. You're going to always see this. That's another argument to get into at another time, but let me get into this article right now. As we see, the video's been taken down. I think I might have it. I'll have to show it to you if I can find it in my files. So what happened here? It was supposed to be a Sunday of sun and fun at the Praia da Reserva beach. But the passage of Sulamita Mirmir 31 became a real inconvenience when phrases like be born white next time, and you have a complex because of having hard hair were uttered in her direction. These pearls were uttered by a woman who was revolted when she realized that the travel agent was recording some of her racist insults, making her the target of the woman's fury. Finally, officers of the 16th precinct picked up the woman identified as Sonia Valeria Rebelo Fernandez, a 45-year-old pedagogue, for clarifications, and she was arrested in the act of a racial injury. Again, she was released on the bail of 500 reais. This is the woman who she verbally assaulted on that beach in Rio. This is from, again, from 2016. According to Sulamita, The woman was speaking to her husband and the two women in a volume loud enough to be heard clearly. And as she reported being proud of her German descent, she went on to repeat the famous Nazi salute, Hail Hitler or Heil Hitler. This was when she decided to record what she witnessed. The victim realized that she was the target of the racism when the lady, blonde and middle-aged, said loud and clear that she didn't understand why a mulata needed to get sun. The case was registered with the police and the aggressor could get up to 3 years in jail. I didn't do anything. I was with my sister and my friend who are white. So I saw that, you know, her comments were directed at me, said Sulamita. I had just got there and already I heard her commenting, looking at me, Heil Hitler. Let's see, black and mulatto aren't a race, they're a subrace. I don't understand why blacks get sun, these ones with cabelo duro, meaning like hard or nappy hair. So again, where's the racial democracy? We're all just Brazilians. This woman says that black and mulatto people are not even a race, they're a subrace. Where's the racial democracy here? Let's just go a little bit further into this article. Let's see. According to the travel agent, the aggressor was saying the whole time that she paid for an expensive condominium and suburbanites, you know, people coming from the suburbs, the poor regions of the city, should go find another beach. This is what I was talking about, how the beach in Rio can be a battling ground of the separations between people of different racial origins. After a few minutes, she said, they should go get another beach, she said, like these people don't belong on this beach. After a few minutes putting up with the offenses, Sulamita decided to pick up the phone and started recording. When her husband told her, when her husband told her I was recording, she got up and came towards me. She continued verbally assaulting me. Everyone on the beach was watching. It turned into a show. She even said, you can record it. I have money and this won't do anything, she reported. So again, you have another situation where this person, you can take this to police, I'm going to pay a fine and I'll walk away scot-free. So what's the point of having racism laws here? People just go and pay a fine and that is done with. She didn't stop saying the biggest racist nonsense and I started to get annoyed until her husband came to warn her that she would eventually be arrested, but she didn't stop. I said nothing to her, but decided to record an audio. When her husband saw, she got exalted and decided to direct the insults to me, Sulamita explained. The travel agent said she decided to make the video when the police were already on their way and ended up recording about a minute of the confusion that, according to her, 2 hours had already been accounted for. The woman defiantly came toward the camera, throwing a kiss before she started to speak. Quote, I don't blame you for feeling assaulted for being a mulata, love. You have a complex. Be born white, understand? You were born mulata. Do what? She said. I have no problem with being mulata, but I didn't understand all that rage with people of another color, Sulamita explained. The way she judged the skin color of people was more than absurd, especially in a country like Brazil. I didn't know what to do, so I recorded what she said. But when she came to me, I didn't know how to defend myself. I didn't want to offend her, says Sulamita, remembering some of the moments that she considered most offensive. She came to me to tell me to go sunbathe on the potty, that she's disgusted by my husband, who is foreign, Swiss, that she loathed him for touching me. A lot of stuff going on in here. What is she saying? She's let's see. She's okay. First of all, this woman says Sulamita, the victim in this case, was like, it was absurd, especially in a country like Brazil. What she's saying here is that she's under the assumption like we're all mixed here. How's this woman attacking me? This is the idea that a lot of Black people have in this country. Like when they buy into the idea that Brazil is a racial democracy, we're all mixed, so there shouldn't be any racism here. You know, it's in a place like Brazil, this is not supposed to happen, where the races are supposed to get along harmoniously. And this is what I'm saying. The deception deceives Black people themselves, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on here. How she says, I didn't know how to defend myself. This woman is verbally assaulting her, and she says, I didn't want to offend her. This is another thing that I find very common here, where a lot of Black people are caught by surprise by racism and they don't know how to react. Like, this has never happened to me. Compare this to how maybe an African American would have reacted on the beach in this same scenario. I just think it probably would have been different. Let's move on. Let me see. Wow. In another section of the recording, the woman denies it was directed at Sulamita. I didn't call you mulata. I was talking to my family and you were offended. Sorry, you're a mulata. It's not my fault. Give thanks to God that you picked up a German, referring to Sulamita's husband, who's actually Swiss. Then she challenged the travel agent to go to the police station. Sulamita listened and recorded the offenses on video and then responded, you called me dingy, a favelada, which means she lives in the slum or the favela. What else? The exalted woman continues, record this ish. And even if you go to the police and be embarrassed, because I don't know who you are, I know who I am. You I've never seen. Make a potty in the back of your house and go get some sun, she mocks, right? It was late afternoon when the police arrived at the beach and got clarifications at the 16th police precinct where the case was registered. I couldn't listen to everything without doing anything, and I don't really want to have to pay only 4 food baskets at the end of the process. She's saying she doesn't want this woman to pay the equivalent of 4 food baskets and just walk away. I want justice. I didn't assault her, but I sought my rights. The worst is that on the internet, people have commented on the video as if it were my exaggeration and as if I hadn't liked being called a mulata. I'm proud of my color. It's not whining, she said. In the last moments of the video, the last moments of the video were striking. Be born white next time. You have a complex, understand, because of having cabello duro or, hard or nappy hair, the woman snapped. It was free hatred. She was annoyed because I'm a mulata. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I will take the case to the end because she doesn't have the right to act like this. Anyway, if you want to read the full article, because it continues to go on in my interpretation of what happened here and pulling in other incidents where this is just common in Brazil. I'll put all of these articles in the description box if you want to go and check out the whole article. But I wanted to put these articles together to give you an idea that whether it's verbal or physical assaults, racist jokes, these type of things happen every day. But fortunately, what I've seen, particularly in the last the last decade and a half, because of the rise of social media, you're seeing more and more Black people fighting back against this type of public treatment and public humiliation, because it's ridiculous. Again, I just asked the question, where is the racial democracy in such, offenses, in such abuse, such verbal assaults, something that happens here every day. Anyway, so let me just close the video out here. Be sure to give this, if you like the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, be sure to share it. Subscribe to the channel if you like the information that I presented here. I'm not saying you like the information. This is a appalling situation. All 3 of them were appalling, but these are things that people need to know outside of Brazil, so you get an idea of the type of racist incidents that happen in Brazil as well. That go counter against the idea of this country being a racial democracy. So anyway, like I said, I'll post the articles in the description box. Again, this is Marcus from the Black Brazil Today channel. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, give me the thumbs up if you like the report. And I'll see you in the next video.